Hey everybody, welcome back to A People's Historian, the show where we read about 30 minutes of history together. My name is Jason Kishinev and we're reading A State of War, Secret History of the CIA and the Bush Administration. If you like the show, hit the like and subscribe button, hit that notification bell, couldn't hurt, in case you get unsubscribed by YouTube. Then that way you'll get notified when I make videos in the future. Let's dig in. We're almost done with the last chapter. There is an afterword. So there'll probably be 2 more episodes of this book, and then we'll start another book. Let's dig in. I'm going to reread the last paragraph just for context. On paper, Merlin was supposed to stunt the development of Tehran's nuclear program by sending Iran's weapons experts down the wrong technical path. The CIA believed that once the Iranians had the blueprints and studied them, they would believe the designs were usable, and so would start to build an atomic bomb based on the flawed design. But Tehran would get a big surprise when its scientists tried to explode their new bomb. Instead of a mushroom cloud, the Iranian scientists would witness a disappointing fizzle. The Iranian nuclear program would suffer a humiliating setback, and Tehran's goal of becoming a nuclear power would have been delayed by several years. In the meantime, the CIA, by watching Iran's reaction to the blueprints, would have gained a wealth of information about the status of Iran's weapons program, which has been shrouded in secrecy. It's not clear who originally came up with this idea, but the plan was first approved by President Bill Clinton. After the Russian scientists' fateful trip to Vienna, however, the Merlin operation was endorsed by the Bush administration, possibly with an eye toward repeating it against North Korea or other dangerous states. The CIA had obtained genuine Russian nuclear weapons blueprints from a Russian scientist and had forwarded them to one of the national laboratories, almost certainly Sandia National Laboratory in New Mexico, to be scrutinized by American nuclear experts. Sandia in Albuquerque is one of the jewels in the crown of the American nuclear establishment. Its origins were in the so-called Z Division of the Los Alamos National Laboratory during the Manhattan Project. Z Division conducted the engineering and design work for the non-nuclear portions of the first atomic bomb, including the weapons assembly. Sandia thus houses the U.S. government's institutional memory for how a nuclear bomb is put together. Scientists at the National Laboratory were asked to implant flaws into the Russian blueprints. The flaws were supposed to be so clever and well hidden that no one could detect their presence. Next, the agency needed to figure out how to get the designs to the Iranians without Tehran realizing that the blueprints were coming from the CIA. The job was assigned to the CIA's Counter-Proliferation Division. The CPD chose the Russian defector. That was the idea behind Merlin anyway, but like so many of the CIA's other recent operations, this one didn't go according to plan. First, of course, the Russians spotted flaws in the blueprints. Second, the CIA never maintained adequate controls over the nuclear blueprints or over the Russian. The Russian was supposed to believe that he was handing over genuine nuclear designs. Instead, his cover letter may have convinced the Iranians to be wary of the blueprints. Furthermore, the CIA also gave the blueprints to the Iranians without any certain way of monitoring their use by Iranian scientists. The CIA was flying blind, dangerously so. In effect, the CIA asked the Russian to throw the blueprints over the transom, and then the agency just hoped for the best. Several former CIA officials say that the theory behind Merlin handing over tainted weapons designs to confound one of America's adversaries is a trick that has been used many times in past operations stretching back to the Cold War. But in previous cases, such Trojan horse operations involved conventional weapons. None of the former officials had ever heard of the CIA attempting to conduct this kind of high-risk operation with designs for a nuclear bomb. The former officials also said these kinds of programs must be closely monitored by senior CIA managers in order to control the flow of information to the adversary. If mishandled, they could easily help an enemy accelerate its weapons development. That may be what happened with Merlin. The CIA case officer was deeply concerned by the ease with which the Russian had discovered flaws in the designs. He knew that meant the Iranians could too, and that they could then fix and make use of repaired blueprints to help them build a bomb. If so, the CIA would have assisted the Iranians in joining the nuclear club. He grew so concerned about whether he had aided the Iranian nuclear program that he went to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence to tell congressional investigators about the problems with the program. But no action was ever taken. For his part, the Russian never understood why the CIA wanted him to give the Iranians blueprints that contained such obvious mistakes. It made no sense, and so he wrote the Iranians his personal letter. It is not known whether the Russian ever communicated It is not known whether the Russian ever communicated again with the Iranians or whether they tried to contact him, but after receiving his letter warning them that they would need further help to make the blueprints useful, it is entirely possible that the Iranians showed the plans to other experts familiar with Russian nuclear designs and thereby identified the defects. Iran has spent nearly 20 years trying to develop nuclear weapons, and in the process has created a strong base of sophisticated scientists knowledgeable enough to spot flaws in nuclear blueprints. What's more, the Iranians have received extensive support for years from Russian and Chinese nuclear experts who could help the Iranians review the material. In addition, Tehran also obtained nuclear blueprints from the black market network of Pakistani scientist A.Q. Khan, and so already had workable blueprints against which to compare the designs obtained from the CIA. Even if the Iranians were interested in using the blueprints provided by the mysterious Russian, they would certainly examine and test the data in the documents before ever actually trying to build a bomb. Nuclear experts say that they would be able to extract valuable information from the blueprints while ignoring the flaws. If a country of 70 million inhabitants, Iran, with quite a good scientific and technical community, got nuclear documents with supposedly hidden flaws, they might learn something, warned a nuclear weapons expert with the IAEA. If the flaw is bad enough, they will find it quite quickly. That would be my fear. This is the weapons expert from the IAEA that said that. Merlin has been conducted in the darkest corner of the American national security establishment at one of the most significant moments in the long and bitter history of U.S.-Iran relations. Iran has bedeviled American presidents since Jimmy Carter and the embassy hostage crisis, and neither Bill Clinton nor George W. Bush have based their policies on an adequate understanding of the volatile political dynamics underway in Iran. Throughout the late 1990s, the Clinton administration was convinced that political reformers and youthful moderates were ascendant in Iran, and so the White House twisted itself in knots trying to open back-channel talks with Tehran. But in order to reach out to the Iranians, Clinton had to downplay evidence that Tehran was still the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, that Iran was still an Islamic republic whose security apparatus was controlled by powerful conservative mullahs who wanted nothing to do with the United States, and that the Iranian regime was eager to become a nuclear power. Critics say that Clinton and his lieutenants repeatedly tried to ignore intelligence indicating that Iran was linked to the deadly Khobar Towers bombing in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia in June 1996, which killed 19 American military personnel. Saudi Hezbollah, an offshoot of the Lebanese-based extremist group backed by Iran, carried out the attack, and it did so with training and logistical support from Iran. Senior CIA officials played an important role in the Clinton administration's efforts to downplay evidence of Iran's terrorist ties in the late 1990s, according to several CIA sources. In 1996 and 1997, a well-placed officer with the Ministry of Intelligence and Security, Iran's Foreign Intelligence Service, was cooperating with the CIA. In meetings in Europe just months after the Khobar attack occurred, the Iranian source provided the CIA with evidence that Iran was behind the bombing, according to CIA officials. The Iranian told the CIA he had been meeting with several senior Iranian officials after the bombing and that they were celebrating their successful operation. He also told his CIA contact that sometime after the Khobar bombing, an American government aircraft had secretly landed in Tehran carrying a senior American official. Several top Iranian officials went out to the airport to meet the American, the source said. To the officers working on the CIA's Iran task force handling the reporting for this Iranian source, it appeared that the Clinton administration was cutting a deal with Tehran just after 19 Americans had been murdered by the same regime. Senior CIA officials responded to this explosive intelligence by suppressing it, according to several CIA sources. According to one CIA source, reports from the Iranian source were delivered to high-ranking CIA officials, but none of the reports was disseminated through the intelligence community, and no record of the reports was distributed inside the CIA. It is not known whether President Clinton or other top White House officials were ever told about the reports from the Iranian source. Certainly then, FBI Director Louis Freeh believed that President Clinton and his lieutenants were downplaying intelligence concerning Iran's involvement in Khobar Towers. As he has recently detailed in his memoirs, his anger over the way the Khobar case was handled by the Clinton administration was at the heart of his long-running dispute with the White House. It is not known whether Freeh was ever told about the reports from the source who detailed Iran's role, however. It wasn't until June 2001, 5 years after the bombing, and after Clinton had left office, that the Justice Department issued indictments of 14 people in the Khobar bombing that alleged the unidentified Iranian officials were behind the terrorist attack. The indictment notwithstanding, in its first few months, the new Bush team largely ignored Iran while obsessing over Iraq. It was only after 9/11 that senior Bush administration officials began to pay attention to low-level, back-channel talks with Iran that had been underway in Geneva since the Clinton days. Through the Geneva meetings, the Bush team discovered that Iran was strongly supportive of the U.S.-led invasion of Afghanistan because of Tehran's deep hatred for the ruling Taliban. Sunni Muslims heavily dependent on Pakistani support to retain power in Kabul. Shia-dominated Iran long feared the Taliban's radical influence on its own Sunni minority. Tehran also wanted to retain its influence over Western Afghanistan, particularly the trading center of Herat. In 1998, Iran and the Taliban had come close to a shooting war. After 9 Iranian diplomats were murdered in Afghanistan and thousands of Shiites were killed following the Taliban's seizure of the northern city of Mazar-e-Sharif, Iran massed troops on the border for a military exercise. Oh, how American of them. And Pakistan had to step in to calm things down. At the time, Iran's leader, Ayatollah Ali Khomeini, made it clear that Iran's patience with the Taliban was wearing thin. I have so far prevented the lighting of a fire in this region which would be hard to extinguish, but all should know that a very great and wide danger is quite near, he declared, prompting a response from the Taliban that the cleric's statements reflected his mental ineptitude. Iran had also supported the opposition Northern Alliance against the Taliban, and after 9/11, Iranian officials at the Geneva meetings were actually impatient with the sluggish start to American military operations in Afghanistan. Publicly, the Iranians said little about the war and provided little overt support to the Americans, apart from promising to allow rescue operations for any downed pilots over its territory. But in Geneva, Iranian officials were eager to help and even brought out maps to try to tell the United States the best targets to bomb. Iran also held some al-Qaeda operatives who tried to flee Afghanistan into Iran. In early 2002, Iran detained about 290 al-Qaeda fighters who had been picked up as they crossed the border. They weren't willing to turn them over directly to the United States, but they eventually did hand out some to third countries, such as Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan, which were working with the United States. But by that time, the Bush administration's whole attitude toward Iran was changing, hardening. Iran was now a member of the Axis of Evil. The Iranians responded to Bush's Axis of Evil speech with pique, P-I-Q-U-E, in case you're curious. Tehran released Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, a ruthless Afghan warlord who had been on the CIA payroll during the 1980s, but who was now opposed to the American occupation of Afghanistan. Soon after his release, Hekmatyar Hezb-e Islami forces were battling U.S. troops in Afghanistan, and in May 2002, the CIA launched a missile from an armed Predator drone in a vain effort to try to kill him. The 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq on Iran's other border was met with deep ambivalence in Tehran. The Iranians were happy that the United States was getting rid of their old enemy Saddam Hussein, opening the door for Iraq's majority Shia population to gain power, with, of course, the guidance of Iran. But two consecutive wars in two neighboring countries, first in Afghanistan and now Iraq, had placed thousands of American troops on Iran's exposed flanks, and so it was not hard to see why the Iranians might be getting a little paranoid about the Bush administration's intentions. In May 2003, 1 month after the fall of Baghdad, the Iranians approached the United States once again, offering to turn over top al-Qaeda lieutenants, including both Saif al-Adel, al-Qaeda's chief of operations, and Saad bin Laden, Osama bin Laden's son. This time the Iranians wanted a trade. In return for the al-Qaeda leaders, Tehran wanted the Americans to hand over members of the Mujahideen-e-Khalq. And then it says in parentheses, capital M-E-K. I'm not sure what that means. An Iranian exile terrorist organization that had been supported by Saddam Hussein and based in Iraq since 1986. After the fall of Baghdad, the U.S. military had disarmed the MEK's thousands of fighters and taken custody of the group's heavy military equipment, more than 2,000 tanks, artillery pieces, armored personnel carriers, and other vehicles provided by Saddam Hussein. But the Bush administration was divided over what to do within the group next. In a principals committee meeting at the White House in May, the Iranian prisoner exchange proposal was discussed by President Bush and his top advisors. According to people who were in the meeting, President Bush said that he thought it sounded like a good idea since the MEK was a terrorist organization. After all, MEK had been a puppet of Saddam Hussein, conducting assassinations and sabotage operations inside Iran from its sanctuary in Iraq. The MEK was officially listed as a foreign terrorist group by the State Department. Back in the 1970s, the group had killed several Americans living in Iran, including CIA officers based there during the Shah's regime. Before any exchange could be conducted, the United States would need solid assurances from the Iranians that the MEK members would not be executed or tortured. In the end, the obstacle may have made any such prisoner trade impossible. If only we'd allowed them to get tortured. Yeah, I don't think so. That was a strange sentence. But the idea never got that far. Hardliners at the Pentagon dug in and ultimately torpedoed any talk of an agreement with the Iranians. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Paul Wolfowitz seemed to think that the MEK could be useful in a future war with Iran, and so they appeared eager to keep the group in place inside Iraq. CIA and State Department officials were stunned that the Pentagon leadership would so openly flaunt their willingness to cut a deal with the MEK. They were even more surprised that Rumsfeld and Wolfowitz paid no price for their actions. Excuse me. At the White House, officials soon learned that the Pentagon was dreaming up excuses to avoid following through on any further actions to rein in the MEK. One argument was that the military was just too busy with too many other responsibilities in Iraq to devote the manpower to dismantling the MEK. The Pentagon basically told the White House that we will get around to it when we get around to it. Excuse me. And they got away with it. The bottom line was that the United States lost a potential opportunity to get its hands on several top Al-Qaeda operatives, including Osama bin Laden's son. It became clear to frustrated aides that National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice was not only failing to curb the Pentagon, but was also allowing decision-making on Iran policy to drift. The MEK's political arm, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, understands how to gain attention in the West, particularly after watching the pre-war success of the Iraqi National Congress. The Iraqi exile group headed by Ahmed Chalabi, like Chalabi's group, the Iranian exiles have used the American press to issue claims about Iran's nuclear weapons and ballistic missile programs in order to build the case for a tougher U.S. policy toward Tehran. While the war in Iraq was overshadowed, the issue... Excuse me, man. I'm a little tired, I apologize. While the war in Iraq has overshadowed the issue and forced the Bush administration to move slowly, some administration officials have been advocating a more forceful policy of pressuring the Iranians to disarm. The odds of a confrontation between the United States and Iran seemed to increase in the fall and winter of 2004 when the IAEA reported that Iran was not fully cooperating with international inspectors, and there were new reports that Iran was going ahead with plans to produce enriched uranium despite past assurances to the IAEA that it would freeze all such activity. By 2005, Iran's apparent intentions to continue to develop its nuclear program was inevitably leading to a full-fledged diplomatic crisis. Thanks for joining me. Tune in to the last episode for the afterword. If you made it this far, don't skip the afterword. Tune in. We're almost done with this book, and we'll start on the next book. I haven't quite decided what that is, or I would be plugging it now, because, I can't resist a chance to plug this stuff. Hit that like and subscribe button. And hit that notification bell. See you next time.